Hey there, and welcome back to another episode of Be Encouraged Moments. As always, we are so grateful that you are here, that you are tuning into these videos, and that you are sharing them with, I hope, friends and family. And if not, you better get to it. If you're new here, I'm Larissa, and this is Jan. We today are going to be talking about feelings or emotions. Now, we've done something, or I've specifically done something like this before. It was almost a year ago, though, and it just felt it was on my mind and I wanted to do it again. But we're going to do it a little differently this time. So previously when I talked about it, I was sharing a children's book and how we talk about and identify emotions with our children. But I want to talk about the emotions that we experience and about what those different emotions are. So again, I think as children, we are taught to identify our feelings and how to express them. I think as parents, aunts, uncles, grandparents, whatever your title is in the family, I think we learn to teach our little ones the importance of their feelings. We put a lot of emphasis on that. But I think somewhere along the way, or we forget, or even worse, we learn that expressing our feelings, our emotions, makes us vulnerable. Or even worse, it makes us feel weak. And so we start to hide those feelings. We start to bottle those up and we start to push them down and we start to become what we think the world wants us to be. I think as kids, we have pretty straightforward emotions. We have joy and we have sadness and we have fear and we have anger and disgust. And it's not much more evolved than that as kids. But as we get older, like everything else in our life, our emotions get more complex. And so we are learning as adults how to identify what those emotions are. And with that complexity, we start to learn that we can feel great joy while also feeling great sadness. And so that's what I mean by the complexity. So we start getting all these different emotions that start working in tandem. And I think we don't always know how to handle that. I think that, like I said before, with this idea of bottling up our feelings, which I think a lot of us do, or we hide them away, or we don't share them with our loved ones, and we face them alone. And like I said, I think more than often than not, we just ignore them altogether. I think we're not allowing ourselves then to truly understand or embrace what those feelings are. So the video I did back in July, we talked a lot about that owning your feelings and that it was okay to feel all of those feels. But I really want you to think about the different kinds of emotions. I want you to take it a step further. It's not just feeling them, it's understanding them and understanding how they work in tandem with one another and not being ashamed of said feelings or emotions. I think when we hide emotions or we push them aside or we ignore them or bottle them up, if you will, we miss opportunities to really feel things. And what I mean by that is that it's okay to be sad. It truly is okay to be sad. Sometimes it just feels really good to sit and cry. And, or to turn to a loved one to talk through something that you're going through. And I don't think that's a sign of weakness. I think that's a tremendous sign of strength. I think that is allowing yourself to feel what you're feeling inside and understand what you're feeling. It's okay to feel pure joy. And I say this, and I point this one out because I think a lot of times as parents, yes, we're happy, we're excited, but we're always a little cautious about showing it too much. We don't want to just be outright silly. We were literally just talking about this, about what other people think of us. I think we don't want someone to think that we're being like over the top. But it's okay. It's okay to be silly with your kids, and you do not have to be ashamed for feeling that or to experience that joy at its peak. It's okay to feel that way. It's okay to get angry. It truly is okay to get angry and to let that out. Obviously, you need to do that responsibly. So if that's like, punching a pillow in your bedroom versus a person, that's much, much better. Absolutely. But it's okay to be angry and to identify that and to own it. I've told her that. Like I told her the other day I was seeing red, and it is a natural part of who we are. It's okay to be afraid. It's okay to feel brave and to feel hopeful. And you kind of see the pattern that I'm going here. It is okay to truly feel those emotions and allow those emotions to express themselves. Those feelings make us who we are. Those feelings create a sense of self. Now I'm going somewhere with all of this, and the reason I think that this is on the very forefront of my mind is because, as you guys all know, I love teaching moments from children's stories. I love teaching moments from movies, from books, from all those kinds of things, because I think when it's done that way, it's done in a simplicity that allows us to truly dive deeper into it. Because again, we make things really complex when we don't need to. So most recently, I'm sure as parents, you guys have all heard about this, but Inside Out has a second movie. So several years ago, they did Inside Out 1, and now Inside Out 2 just came out like this month. And we have gone and seen it. I took Marley, and I took, the first time we went with her friends, and we loved it so much, we went back and saw it a second time, and like we're so excited to see it a third time. Now, if you don't know the movie, the first movie follows a little girl who, and I'm talking like little, like toddler age up to maybe, 10. Her name is Riley, and we get to experience the emotions inside of her head. And they're very obvious emotions that I was talking about earlier, which would be joy, sadness, fear, anger, and disgust. And you see how these emotions learn to interact together. And, in the beginning, it's all about one emotion at a time, those kinds of things. And we kind of learn in that movie that it's okay to have two emotions at a time. Well, in the second movie, Riley has turned 13. And with 13 comes the teenage years. And with the teenage years comes more complex emotions. And I just love how they do this, because I think that, again, it's the simplicity of it. I mean, as we get older, pieces get added to us and things start happening. And so in the new movie, I haven't memorized them all, so I'm looking down here, but we get introduced to anxiety, envy, embarrassment, and ennui, which I just love that name. Yeah. It's French for boredom. And I think it's just those four emotions like encompass teenage years, I feel like. I mean, I remember my teenage years, and I've watched friends' kids go through teenage years, and I'm starting to see some of this in Marley. And so I couldn't believe how like on the nose this stuff was. But as we go through the second movie, you see the dynamic as the old emotions try to work with the new emotions. And eventually, the new emotions start to push the old emotions out until they kind of kick them out of what they call headquarters. And I don't want to give you the whole story, because if you haven't seen it yet, I highly, highly recommend that you do go out and see it. And if you don't have the finances to go out and see it in the movie theater, see it when it comes out. It is totally worth it, and it's going to be a great opportunity for you to explore things with your kids. But so in the movie, one thing I am going to touch on is there's two pieces that I really, really loved. And one of them is a scene where Joy is with the original 5 emotions, and they're no longer in headquarters, and she's kind of feeling defeated. Like anxiety has taken over, and she doesn't know how to help Riley anymore. And so she makes the comment that maybe this is what happens when you grow up. You feel less joy. Just that statement alone, that has been floating all over the internet. I'm sure you probably have seen it. It's just like, wow, like, because it hits to the core. As adults, we feel less joy. However, I'm going to challenge that. I don't think that we feel less joy. I do believe that we feel more complex versions of joy. And what I mean by that is that, again, it goes back to what I was saying earlier about having more than one emotion playing a part in what we're doing. And so it's not, our joy isn't always as straightforward as it was when we were 5 or 6 or 7. Seeing a flower just brought us great joy. Well, now as adults, flowers are great, but now I have to take care of them, and I have to put them in a vase, and I have to, it's the complexities of things. And so while flowers can still bring us joy, it's a more complex level of joy. And so I think there are things in our life that do bring us that pure innocent joy, like our children probably. But even that comes with complications. When they're not being good, or when they're not going to bed, or when they're not eating their veggies, it's a complex joy. We love them. We love them dearly. And then, like I said, the joy is, it moves, and it's a moving target. And so, and with that, with the other clip that that really stood out to me was anxiety. So towards the end of the movie, you see anxiety take control of the emotions board, which will make a ton more sense if you see the movie. But she starts circling, and she's just circling until it's like a tornado, just circling, and nobody can get to her because the force of the energy is just pushing everybody back, and anxiety. And you actually watch this happen to Riley, and Riley is like, she's got all these, she's having an anxiety attack, and it's very prevalent, and it's it was so eye-opening as a parent to see that, because I know that I'm going to have that moment with Marley because she's trying to understand these emotions. And the other reason it hit home for me was because anxiety is a very real thing for all of us. I think we all experience anxiety in ways that, that are just, it feels like it's taking over everything else. And so to wrap all of this up, what I want you to hear is that there are multiple emotions. And if you don't learn to sit with them and understand what those emotions are, one emotion can take over and one emotion can take control. And so one of the things I said about sitting with your sadness, like I think that is a very real thing. I think sometimes just sitting down and crying, but you have to know when to let it go. Yep. You have to know when to move on. You have to know when to let the joy back in. Or maybe you're so joyful that you have to know when to let the anger in and let things get to you. Sometimes you just need, and like I said, so you need to be able to shift evenly between all of those different emotions. And you need to identify what those emotions are for you. Obviously, I'm using the ones that were demonstrated in the movie, but there are other emotions. There are love, there are peace, we could go on for days listing off all the different kinds of emotions. And again, that's that complexity that we get as adults. Life happens. And from our journeys, we have shaped our sense of self based on our experiences. That's where the whole idea of us having different emotions comes into play and how those level each other out. Mm-hmm. The way my joy levels out my anxiety may not be for you. Maybe it's the sadness that helps bring that anxiety down, or the anger, or the, whatever the case may be for you. None of us will experience emotions the same, but I think we can all learn to understand what is going on inside of us. And I think we all owe it to ourselves to understand what's going on inside of us. Allow yourself the time to explore and understand those things. We can't hide from our emotions. We just can't. They're never going to go away. They're not going to stop happening. Emotions are very much a part of us. We have to own them in order to be who we are meant to be, that sense of self idea, that person who God intended us to be. God knew us before we knew ourselves. He is with us in all of this. He sees the ugly, he sees the hard, he sees the good, he sees the silly, he sees all of it. It's not a question. He is there in all of it. Right. God, for example, we have scripture after scripture after scripture telling us to give it to God, to be with God, to stand with God, to let God come alongside of us. You could go on for ages. He wants to help us carry the load when it gets to be too much. When anxiety starts to take over the board, God is the peace that helps you level that out. God is going to him in prayer, going to him in scripture, going to your loved ones. And that by going to your loved ones, that is part of going to God in my mind, because that's what God has put on earth for us to have that one-on-one interaction. He doesn't want to see us stuck in one emotion. That's why he's given us all of these opportunities. Give it to me. There are two scriptures that I want to share with you that are specific to anxiety, because again, I really honed in on the anxiety piece of this, but it's cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Cast it on him because he cares for you. Again, example after example of scriptures. So that was 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 7. The second one is, when anxiety was great within me, your consolation brought me joy. And there's that balancing act of the two emotions. And so that's from Psalm 94, verse 19. All of this is because I think we can't talk enough about emotions. I think we, as adults, as I started out in the beginning, have been taught not to talk about these things. I don't think that's okay. So I'm going to continue to bring this topic to the forefront. And it's been a year, so it was time. We needed to talk about it again.
Yes.
Basically, in a nutshell, the last video that we did in July was called Feel All the Feels. This one is going to be called Emotions, but it's the same concept. So you can go back and watch the one from last July that talks about, like I said, the feelings and identities. And then that one also centers on how we talk about it with our children. But the really cool thing that I'm bringing to you, a new tool that I'm bringing to you today is, I'm not kidding, these movies will really help you open up that door of acknowledgement in a fun way that your kids can begin to understand and identify. And my hope, my daughter hasn't gone through the teenage years yet, but I have a pretty good handle on what I think our teenage years are going to look like, because she has owned her emotions. She has identified them, and she knows that it's a safe space to talk about them with me. So if we expect that of our children, why do we not expect that of ourselves? Okay? So Thank you, as always, for joining us for our Be Encouraged moment.